everyone. Welcome to our course, Green Economy from China's Stories. In this lesson, we will learn about research scale of ecological footprint. In this picture, we can see that current mainstream research on ecological footprint is carried out from 3 levels, namely worldwide level, which refers to the research carried out globally, research in national and provincial level, and the most microscopic level, research in urban and regional level. Next, let's learn about the researches in these levels. As for the worldwide level research, WWF, ZSL, and GFN produce the Living Planet Report in every 2 years. This report emphasizes changes in biodiversity, ecosystems, and demand on natural resources. In this report, most countries in the world are evaluated, and the impact of these changes on biodiversity and humanity is explored. Due to participation of Zoological Society of London, biodiversity is given more attention. In this report, all countries can be classified by consumption. The consumption data of these countries shown in this report can be found. Taking the Living Planet Report 2014 as an example, this report shows the status of ecological footprints of all countries. We may notice that, generally, the ecological footprints of developed countries in Europe and America was high, and we can find detailed explanations in this report. This report proposed the concept of longitudinal timeline, and we can trace the data as early as 1961. The data between 1961 and 2014 provide a complete retrospect for us. In 2014, the global per capita ecological footprint reached 2.84 global hectares. Let's take a look at this figure. In 1961, the Earth had an ecological surplus, but gradually the ecological surplus decreased. The upward curve changed. We can see that the ecological surplus vanished. After that, the ecological deficit showed and got bigger and bigger. Based on the data in 2014, how many Earths will be required to produce the goods demanded by humanity? The answer is 1.7 Earths, which are required to produce the renewable resources and absorb the carbon dioxide emitted. In 2014, it is 1.7 Earths that are required to mitigate the impact of human activities. Let's look at this figure again carefully. The red line refers to ecological footprint, while the blue line is biocapacity, and the green area refers to ecological surplus. The orange area refers to ecological deficit. In 1961, human economic activities had a small impact on the Earth. This reflects the trend. As the ecological footprint became higher and higher, we need to take actions to reduce it. The figure shows ecological footprint per country, per capita, in 2010. We can learn from this figure that different countries have different ecological footprint. All countries are ranked by their per capita ecological footprint, from high to low, which is interesting. The font size may be small. In this report, you can find the detailed rankings of these countries. As we can see, America enjoys a high rank. If everyone lived like an average resident of the USA, a total of 4 Earths would be required to regenerate humanity's annual demand on nature. This is the level of a developed country. However, if humans lived on the Indonesian average, only 2/3 of global biocapacity would be consumed. So, it is important to note that developed countries play a great role in the increase in the total ecological footprints. Then, let's compare the ecological footprint of economic regions in 1961 and 2010. Globally, total biocapacity was 1.2 times larger in 2010 than it was in 1961. The available biocapacity per person decreased from 3.2 to 1.7 GHA. In all economic regions, population growth played a greater role than the increase in per capita ecological footprint, which is the basic situation. The figure above shows ecological footprint of economic regions in 1961, while the figure below indicates the ecological footprint in 2010. We just learned about the research conducted worldwide. China has been emphasizing the construction of ecological civilization and sustainable development. It has partnered with some institutions to do some research. Taking Living Planet Report China 2015 as an example case, I will introduce the research carried out in the national level to you. This report explores from three perspectives of Species Trend Index, ecological footprint, and water footprint to reflect how human survival and development rely on the health of the ecosystem, basic species, and natural resources. This report raises three indicators, namely Species Trend Index, which we learned in the previous part, ecological footprint, and water footprint. Water footprint refers to the volume of water consumed in product manufacturing and service, and volume of fresh water polluted, which produces the water footprint. So, this report is relatively complete. It provides a reference for the situation of China's ecological system. Okay, let's take a look at this report. What we may learn from this report is the per capita ecological footprint and biocapacity of China. Taking the data of 2010 as an example, we can notice that the red line refers to per capita ecological footprint, and the green line refers to the per capita biocapacity. From this figure, we also notice that before 1968, when China's economy was not well developed, national production carrying capacity and per capita biocapacity were slightly higher than the per capita ecological footprint. However, along with China's massive economic growth and rapidly growing economy, starting in the 2010, China's per capita ecological footprint grew rapidly. The gap between per capita ecological footprint and ecological carrying capacity per person becomes wider and wider. For example, looking at the data in 2010, we know that the average Chinese resident required 2.2 GHA of productive land to meet the demands of environment, goods, and services. However, in 2010, per capita biocapacity available in China was only 1 GHA, which was 120% higher than the ratio. So, China has a severe ecological overspending, also known as ecological deficit. That's the reason why China makes great endeavor in environment protection and returning farmland to forests, hoping to improve its ecological carrying capacity. The government has made great efforts in advancing these measures. Now, let's take a closer look at China's ecological footprint components. Reviewing the history from 1961 to 2010. We can see that cropland was the largest component of the ecological footprint in China until the late 1980s. It is because China is an agricultural country. We can see the curves from 1961 to 2010 in this figure, which uses different colors to indicate different components. The blue area refers to carbon footprint. The figure also shows fishing grounds, cropland, and other components. It is interesting that the cropland has always remained a large component, but since 1980, when China implemented reform and opening up, productivity has been released and grown quickly. Many factories have been built up, and per capita consumption has gradually increased. Among China's ecological footprint, carbon footprint has become the largest and the fastest growing component. Why has this happened? Because production requires massive energy supply. For example, the thermal power stations built for power would emit a lot of carbon dioxide. Other production and living activities also require a lot of electricity. Along with rapid carbon footprint growth during this period, there was a massive increase in energy consumption in China. That's the situation of China's ecological footprint. Now, we will learn about, in 2012, total biocapacity and ecological footprint of all provinces in China. We have more detailed category than the aforesaid international and China's ecological footprint. Let's compare the data of more than 30 provinces in China. All provinces are ranked in terms of total biocapacity and per capita ecological footprint. Let's take a look at these figures. In this situation, this is the total biocapacity of all provinces in mainland China. And in 2012, half of the country's total biocapacity was concentrated in 9 provinces. This is relatively concentrated. Meanwhile, per capita ecological footprint of all provinces in China are also shown in this report and have notable variations. Look at this figure below. Which province ranks first? It is Guangdong Province, then Jiangsu Province, and Shandong Province, etc., which rank by the front. Generally, eastern provinces with more developed economies had relatively high per capita ecological footprint, while provinces in central and west China had relatively low per capita ecological footprint. It is proportional to the overall disposable income of the population. A massive increase in consumption is a major driver of the total ecological footprint. Based on the data in 2012, let's have a look at the ecological deficit, surplus, of provinces in mainland China. We can see the rankings of all provinces in mainland China. How is it calculated out? By deducting the ecological footprint from the biocapacity of the province. We can get the ecological deficit, surplus. In this figure, the red area refers to ecological deficit, while the green area refers to ecological surplus. We can learn from the figure that most provinces had an ecological deficit, and Shanghai, Beijing, and Tianjin were in higher deficit. What's the characteristics of these cities? They have concentrated population. Cities with concentrated population have less natural environment available, poor infrastructure, and high living and production density per capita. Leads to the high ecological deficit. Most provinces had an ecological deficit. As shown in the figure, only the Tibet Autonomous Region and Qinghai Province had an ecological surplus. When Great Western Development Strategy was raised, what was the key point? Environmental protection. The local ecological advantages can't be damaged as a result of economic development of the Western region. Developing the economy based on the environmental protection is a rule for our economic development. We have introduced the research on national level. Let's talk about the reports at the urban and regional level. In this year, China issued an overall plan of Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. The overall economic development must be underpinned by environment, so we have to pay attention to the ecological footprint of this region and its status of sustainable development. We can check this report. Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. Ecological Footprint Report 2019. This is a relatively new report, because we care about the sustainable development of this region. This report, from two aspects, the ecological footprint and biocapacity, analyzes the current demand and supply of ecological capital in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. Ecological situation in Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area is a microcosm of the severe ecological challenge facing China. With developed economy, this region is a major driver of China's economic growth. But what it faces is typical issues for most regions in China. We should pay attention to it and choose it for case study in order to provide experience and reference for other regions. We can see the total ecological carrying capacity of Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area from this figure. Major cities in this region are listed, such as Zhaoqing, Guangzhou, and Jiangmen, as well as Hong Kong, Macau, and Shenzhen. In this bar graph, we compare the data in 2000 and 2015. In 2015, per capita biocapacity of Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area was 0.27 GHA, which was 1.4 GHA lower than the global per capita biocapacity of 1.68 GHA, and had a decrease of 17% from that in 2000. Its ecological carrying capacity keeps falling. In this figure, we may explain some concepts in more detail, namely total ecological footprint and regional composition of Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. What is its total ecological footprint? According to distribution of the ecological footprint, what's the situation of all regions? This bar graph also showed the data in 2000 and that in 2015. Let's make a comparison. In 2015, the total ecological footprint of Greater Bay Area was 280 million GHA. Which cities have greater ecological footprint? Cities with a developed economy, such as Guangzhou and Shenzhen, had a higher ecological footprint. Meanwhile, we can see regional composition of ecological footprint. Meanwhile, we can see regional composition of ecological footprint of Greater Bay Area from the pie graph below. We know the changes in proportions by analyzing the data in 2010 and 2015. In summary, more than 80% of total ecological footprint was concentrated in 5 cities: Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Foshan, Dongguan, and Hong Kong. These cities contributed 52% footprint increase of Greater Bay Area, which is worth our attention. Such cities with great economic growth may not rank by the front of biocapacity, but they do have a higher ecological footprint. Then we do some detailed analysis. Let's compare the data in 2000 and 2015. And, according to the pie graph, analyze the components of ecological deficit of Greater Bay Area. In case of ecological footprint exceeding biocapacity, which cities have an ecological deficit? The components of ecological deficit remain stable, and the variation in total ecological deficit was not obvious. This was the overall situation that we need to know. Then, let's take a look at the urban composition of ecological deficit. Hong Kong, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen account for about 65%, and Dongguan and Foshan account for 21%. Other cities account for about 15%. That's the components and urban composition of ecological deficit of Greater Bay Area, and its variation between 2010 and 2015. That's all